Alright guys, welcome back to Persona 3 Reload. Last time we met in Persona 3. What did we do? We started a social link part, but it wasn't like a huge social link part. It was basically the tutorial for like what to do in social links and stuff like that. But right now we are actually going into Tartarus, which is for the first time within the not tutorial. Technically there are tutorials anyway for this area. For this version, especially later, we're going to be learning about something called shifting, which is the baton pass system, essentially, from Persona 5, but with a few differences that I think I was wrong about back when I was talking about, when I lightly talked about shifting a couple parts ago, but we won't be learning about shifting for a while, but I'm here to, let's talk about the scope of Tartarus in terms of what to do in Tartarus, essentially, because there is a little bit to do. There is some mechanics about Tartarus that you will learn about, and here's the first thing that you will learn, especially if you're playing New Game Plus, is since Makoto is level 99, these enemies are intended to be fought at like level 1. But since I am way over leveled, they're actually going to actively run away from me on the in the overworld, meaning that it's going to be a little hard to chase them down. Now, why am I fighting despite the fact I'm level 99? Well, Yukari and Junpei. I don't want Yukari and Junpei to be under-leveled, especially because we're going to have to eventually do the likes of the full moon missions, and I prefer having a full party no matter what for the sake of backup. Because once again, I will mention that all of your other party members can die in battle. The only character that can't is you, the protagonist. Makoto can't die in battle. If he does, you are prompted to the game over screen. There is an exception, mind you. If you are playing on this game's peaceful difficulty, you essentially can revive over and over and over again until you win the battle, so you could technically brute force it. But again, this isn't a peaceful mode run, this is simply just a normal mode run. I was contemplating going into hard mode for a little bit, but I just chose against it because I didn't see the point. I wasn't going to do Merciless, I'm not that crazy. And, I'm not going any lower. But a few things. So Tartarus is the only dungeon in the game. There is no other dungeon in this game until we do the answer, but we'll get into that later, way later. And so Tartarus is a giant tower, so you're going to be constantly going up the floors. But there are a few gimmicks with Tartarus. The first main thing is the simple fact that every time you visit Tartarus, the layout changes, except for a few floors, which are typically the border floors where you encounter a boss fight. But every floor has its own gimmicks. But we won't start getting into the gimmick floors until way later. Right now, Thievel is the most simple area where you're just running around looking for treasure chests and enemies to fight. That is the only, that is the main reason you come to Tartarus, because you inevitably do need to be at a certain level for the full moon boss battles and stuff like that. I mean, do keep into consideration that in order to come to Tartarus, you do have to ask Mitsuru or Fuka later on that you want to go to Tartarus, and you lose that evening because you wanted to go to Tartarus. But you can spend as long as you want in Tartarus. Time will never pass. Despite it being called the Dark Hour, you can take as long as you fucking want here. Time will not pass until you leave Tartarus. How that works, I legitimately don't know. I don't think they do justify it later, saying that time passes differently in the Dark Hour. But I don't know. I'm not really convinced about that. But that's just me personally, I guess. But in terms of enemies that you will encounter, you're just encountering the basic ones most of the time. Later on, you'll learn about shadows that are higher level than you, and they are typically the most dangerous shadows you'll come across. And if you're planning on fighting them, you got to be ready for a fight because they're much stronger than the normal shadows. But usually you just want to do I don't know many people who go to Tartarus just to go up and down the floors and not fight at all. I feel like you're wasting your time with that, unless you're doing like a level 1 challenge for Persona 3, which I don't think you can do, because I think you level up in the tutorial battles no matter what. I know that there are mandatory battles, and I think there are challenges where people try to get through Persona 3, 4, and 5, and basically any RPG by only just doing the mandatory battles, which are just battles that, typically, that you have to do for the sake of story, whether it's like a simple, tutorial battle for a new mechanic in the game, or a boss battle, of course. But the main thing you're doing in Tartarus, besides fighting shadows, is exploring the floors. And I've talked about the floor exploration before, but, there are things you can look for, such as treasure chests, that give you money, items, and stuff like that. And then there's those little crystals that I've been using Makoto's sword to break. Because they also give you materials. And if it feels like I'm repeating myself, I most likely am, because I don't remember exactly what I said in the previous part. So please forgive me if I am repeating myself. I am a bit of a fucking idiot, and it has been a few days since I last recorded that part of Tartarus. But there's not really much I can talk about with Feeble specifically, because the gimmicks for Tartarus floors don't start until later on. When you start getting into the second level, because yes, besides the actual floors, there are like different zones of Tartarus that you will go through. I think there's about 13, I want to say. And Feeble is the first one, and it's the easiest one, and it doesn't have any gimmicks. The only thing that I think carries over into Feeble once you start exploring the rest of Tartarus is the Reaper. But we can't really... first off, I couldn't fight the Reaper right now, even if I wanted to. Technically, I can. Well, okay. In terms of abilities and stuff like that, I can't fight the Reaper because I don't think I'd win. But in terms of, also game programming, I can't fight the Reaper right now. Because he's not enabled until, floor 68, I want to say. Or somewhere in the upper 60s, I want to say. So, the Reaper is, not here right now. He's on sabbatical, I guess. He's on his vacation. We can't bother him right now. That or he's just scared of us. I would go with scared of us, considering that I will spoil this now. When I do unlock the Reaper, that is such a weird way to phrase that. When I do unlock the Reaper, I do grind with him by using Makoto's Theurgy, which one of them is Armageddon, which is the most broken ability in the game, technically, where it basically one-shots everything, with a few exceptions, like the final boss, obviously, and Elizabeth are two exceptions that Armageddon doesn't work on that well. But I use Armageddon on the Reaper to kill him instantly. And when you kill the Reaper, you get a lot of experience out of it. Which, if everyone is at level 20 when you kill the Reaper, they jump to level 80. And that's what I did, because as I said before, it would take forever to legitimately grind all the other members of C's to around Makoto's level, only for them to reset once I do another New Game Plus playthrough. But, right now, I am actively trying to make it to where Makoto doesn't do anything. But the thing is that experience goes to Makoto anyway, despite the fact that he's not technically doing anything, because he's simply part of the party. Because experience divides amongst party members and your personas you have equipped, meaning that everybody gets a share if they're in the party, even if they didn't do anything. So, like, there are times where Junpei will say, yeah, nailed it, Junpei, even though he didn't do jack shit. Also, right now they're telling us about border floors and teleporters that can take you to the entrance and back to that floor, because, you know, they want you to prepare for the battles up ahead.
Connected to one another. Once activated, you should be able to travel between any of the other devices. Be sure to activate any you come across. They'll be quite useful during future expeditions.
Yeah, so there are two types of teleporters, the one-way teleporter and the two-way teleporter. So if you want to, you know, so usually you would encounter two-way teleporters in border floors like this one. Yeah, that's really all that there is. It's, you know, it's a way to teleport back to the border floor if you need to, and teleport back to the entrance, you know, right before a boss battle if you want. You know, just in case, say for example, you feel like your health and SP are pretty low and you don't know if you'll win, you can go back and redo your get ready for the battle back in the entrance, or go fuse personas in the Velvet Room. That's totally up to you. By the way, I love this theme that's playing. It's called Masters of Tartarus. I love the remake, the remix version. I do love the original, but I love the new version too.
Well done. Let's continue exploring.
Unfortunately, we won't be hearing it for long most of the time, since I do speed through these battles a little fast, because, again, Makoto's level 99.
Nicely done.
Also, I've been noticing this lately with this game, that there are some, like, pixelating graphics every now and then, especially during transitions. I honestly don't know what's causing that. I'm assuming it's something with my capture card, and I have no idea how to fix it, so I apologize if that bothers you a little bit, because usually the game transitions look a lot smoother than that. I don't know if it's maybe because either my capture card's doing it, or... Well, I don't notice it when I'm recording footage for this game. So it might be something with, you know, the video editor I'm using, which is DaVinci, but I don't know. I don't know what it is, but it's not the end of the world to me. It's like probably like 2 seconds, and it's not noticeable. Or it is pretty noticeable, I guess. I am pointing it out.
Is that?
Alright, yeah, this is where we learn about shifting. So earlier I vaguely talked about shifting, and I do believe I mentioned that when you shift, you can when you shift to another party member, they gain buffs as a result. I was actually wrong on that, and I apologize. Turns out I was actually thinking of a power-up or a passive move that some of your party members can get, called Shift Bonus, which does do that. So I was so used to having that ability for most of my characters, so I didn't realize that I was talking about that. So that is my own fault there. Yeah, so here, this is where we're learning about shifting. So what happens is, when you strike an enemy weakness, you'll get your one more, and you can shift your turn to another party member. It doesn't matter who, and they could do the same thing. They can hit another weakness and then shift over to another party member. This is really good, you know, especially if the shadows you're fighting, all the shadows you have that are on the battlefield all have different weaknesses. And you happen to have all of your party members happen to have weaknesses against it. But again, take into consideration of a few things when that happens. You don't get a power up, you don't get a buff when you do it. So don't get too excited there. But, you know, once you start getting... and another thing is that you can't pass your turn to someone who already had their turn. So, for example, like right when I did that weakness strike with Yukari, I can't switch back to Makoto because Makoto passed the turn on to her in the first place. Oh yes, and if a shadow hits you in the overworld, when you enter the battle, the shadow has advantage. but it's not a huge deal. Unless you know it's a stronger enemy, then be scared.
Looks like the enemy's weak to ice. Nicely done. Enemy eliminated. I can handle it. Roger that. What next? Yo! That's an enemy down. Good job, Takeba. You're in.
So, at the time of this recording, actually, another Atlas game actually came out this, a couple days ago, that I actually started playing a little bit today, called Metaphor Refantasio. I played a little bit of it today, and it is actually really good. I saw a little gameplay footage of it because I got recommended a video about it, because there were Persona skins in it. Or at least for the Digital Deluxe Edition, which costs like $99 fucking dollars. So if you want the fucking Digital Deluxe content, you have to pay like $99 for that shit. No thanks. Especially for some costumes that don't really do anything. No thank you. I'll pay for the costumes I want, but not all of them for $99 plus the game. Yeah, no thank you. Unless there's going to be a DLC campaign, then I'll buy the season. I'll buy the $39.99 thing, but I'm not paying $39.99 for that. I mean, I love Atlas, I really do, but, you know, not all their DLC is great, just saying. Because how much were they charging for episode I guess? It was $39.99 for episode I guess, which I feel like a bulk of that was because of the episode I guess campaign itself, because that is at least a 20-hour RPG on its own. But they also added, like, they also added other music that you can use in Tartarus and in battles from other Persona games, and the Velvet Room costumes, which it's just the Velvet Room costumes, nothing else. They charge money for that, I believe. But I bought the season pass anyway, because I knew I was going to play episode I guess anyway, because I know what some people say about the answer originally, but I did like the answer originally. I did have some criticisms about it when I first played it, but, you know, I've come to appreciate it a little more, you know. And plus, with the fact, we could also, plus, this is, again, the definitive way to play Persona 3, so this is also the definitive way to play the answer, because at first, I was under the impression that they weren't going to do the answer at all for this remake, because I want to say after Persona 3 FES or FES, I guess it is FES, because I say FES, but it's apparently FES, but I'm going to keep saying FES. But after Persona 3 FES, Atlas, I guess, just tried to bury the answer or something, because they never really reference it. You know, Persona 3 Portable, the answer was completely missing from both campaigns.
All right.
Which I guess was which made a little sense for data restriction, but that because, you know, it was originally for the PlayStation Portable.
It's a treasure chest.
Meaning that there just wasn't as much data, but there was also enough data to put there was enough data to put two RPG, like 80-hour RPGs on there. Yes, they were visual novels, but you guys couldn't do the same thing for the answer for at least Makoto's. But I guess that's just me. And then, I mean, I know they referenced certain aspects of the answer, like they referenced they put Heartful Cry in the from the answer in Persona 3 Dancing, and they like, and I think the Persona 4 Arena games reference it a couple times, but like they really don't like acknowledging it that much though, from what I've gathered. And I will admit that there are some aspects about it I didn't like originally, but it was mainly in terms of difficulty from what I've gathered, from what I remember. But that's just me personally. Excuse me. And they also, one thing I do hate about the remake is that they kind of toned down the answer a little bit. And, well, they toned down certain scenes to begin with in this remake. But there's one scene in episode I guess, and if you've played the original answer, you know exactly what I'm talking about. that they kind of downplayed it a little bit. Not downplayed it. They sort of censored it a little bit because in the original it was freaky as hell. But in the remake, it's much more tame, which is really unfortunate. But that's just me personally. Okay, so yep, here we go. This is actually where we learn about Arcana bursting with Shuffle Time. So when you get all of the slots for your major Arcana cards filled, you will enter Arcana Burst, which means, first off, the immediate bonus is that you draw additional cards. You draw an additional card that's a higher level, that's a higher tier than the current tier you're on. And every shuffle time from now on, all the cards are a higher tier to begin with. So, say for example, all of your cards are at tier 1, they'll all be at tier 2 from here on out because of Arcana bursting. Yep. So, yep. It is good to get Arcana bursting as soon as possible, because I will say this, and I will say it now, grinding in Tartarus has been made so much easier in the remake. In the original, Jesus Christ, grinding in Tartarus was a goddamn chore. And, you know, grinding in RPGs is always a chore, but in Persona 3 it was worse. It was so, and there were just so many mechanics that screwed you over in the original Persona 3 and in FES, where, like, you know, if you had someone split off to find treasure for you, if they found money, and I mean any sort of money, they kept it and didn't give it to you, which is such bullshit, because it's like, oh yeah, I found some money, I'm not giving it to you because fuck you. You know, because it kind of makes sense. If you find money, you're not going to give it to somebody. But they fixed that in later versions of every game of Persona 3. But it's just like, you know, it's like, hey, and it made me start thinking, man, then using this mechanic's fucking pointless, because, you know, I'd rather just keep the money for myself.
Man, I'm parched. I'm gonna go ahead and say there are no vending machines here. Time to show you what I got!
Nicely done. Enemy eliminated.
You know,
Well done. You won. Now let's move on.
Yeah! Who's up next?
Is that treasure?
oh, good. I do need an odd morsel for a social link, actually, so that's good. But Persona 3 Reload, in terms of mechanics related to Tartarus, kind of took like the best of both worlds when it comes to original Persona 3 and Persona 3 Portable. And that's honestly what you could say for the whole remake as a whole, is it just kind of took everything that worked in Persona 3 Portable and everything that worked in Persona 3 and just kind of mixed them together. And that's kind of a crude way of explaining it, but it also just kind of makes sense a little bit.
Nicely done. Enemy eliminated. You won. Now let's move on.
But they also, you know, gave it the, I don't know how to word this, the Persona 5 style treatment, where, you know, lately, if you've noticed, especially look up Metaphors' UI, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Atlas games lately have been really stylized. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with stylizing your menu and all that kind of stuff, you know, especially if it somewhat fits the theme and, you know, it doesn't end up being a clusterfuck to read, because I've seen some really stylish menus, but I could barely fucking read or understand what the fuck's going on in that menu, because Jesus Christ. You know, Atlas manages to do a decent job in making sure the menu makes sense while also being visually distinct. But, you know, some people complain that they went a little overboard for Persona 3 Reload specifically, because they're just making Persona 5, they're making Persona 3 into Persona 5. Which I don't know if it's like I don't think it's a terrible thing personally. You know, it's getting people who got first exposed to Persona with Persona 5 feel a little more comfortable with Persona 3, because, you know, it's a new game, and, you know, especially if they know Persona 3 before, and they know how difficult Persona 3 is, or originally was, in terms of design, then they would feel a little intimidated going into a remake of Persona 3, because they wouldn't think, oh, they updated everything to be more in line with 5. So I feel that stylizing Persona 3 to be more like Persona 5 isn't the worst thing in the world, and it's not as in-your-face as Persona 5. You know, it's a little more tame. It's a little tame compared to 5.
But I can only assist like this when we know the enemy's weakness. I'm sorry, but until you can get more information, you'll be on your own.
So what was the point of the tutorial prompt? So yes, yes, so if you press R1, Mitsuru will automatically choose what action for you to do next, or at least guide you in that general direction. So, you know, if you're absolutely not sure of what to do next, you could press R1 and Mitsuru will immediately tell you, like, what action you should do. So in this case, I had her do it, and she told me to pass over to Junpei because he had a fire skill I could use. But I also have a fire skill I could use, so she typically goes in... They typically try to do whatever's offensive, and whatever will do the most damage. So they may say, I don't think they will ever tell you to, like, heal your party or use a buff or debuff skill, because that's your decision. But she's just trying to help you strike a weakness or get a critical hit. So, like, if I froze an enemy in that battle, assuming let's assume I did, I think Mitsuru would tell you to pass over to Junpei, and if you went to Junpei, she'll say use a physical skill to get a critical hit.
Kind of gatekeeper. They're always stronger and nastier than the last.
Well, seems like after we beat him once, it's adios forever.
And I like how I just purposely interrupted Junpei. Yes, by the way, I will be interrupting the Tartarus conversations because I honestly don't give a fuck. There is some pretty funny dialogue, but I'm not going to drop what I'm doing, you know, just to hear what they have to say. You know, especially because I've heard it before, because I've played this game before. But at the same time, it's like one of those things where it's like, if you guys want to hear what they say, there's plenty of videos out there where they talk about what, where they show off every single thing of dialogue they have, because it's kind of like Mementos back in Persona 5, where they had random conversations where depending on who's in the party. Well, in Persona 5 everyone talked no matter what, but in this game it's depending on who's in the party. Like there's one, if you have a party of all females, of all the female members of C's except for yourself, obviously. I think Igus calls it a harem, as a and some other stuff. And there's also like the joke of like if you're dating all of the female party members because of the social link, it's like a very awkward silence. But that's besides all that. So the next time we meet in Persona 3 Reload, we're going to be continuing on with exploring Tartarus, and I think we're actually going to end up leaving Tartarus next part anyway, because we don't do much in this block of Tartarus, but I don't know. See you guys next time, and take care.